This episode is brought to you by Flex Dealer.
If you know you're deficient and you're humble enough to admit it, then you have to surround yourself with those that are not to make up for whatever skills you may lack.
Hey gang, welcome to this episode of the Dealer Playbook Podcast. Sitting down with Todd Caputo. He's the president of Todd Caputo Consulting. We're going to be talking about the state of affairs when it comes to the wholesale and retail market. You got to stay tuned. Coming up next. Todd, thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook Podcast.
Michael, always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You had posted something on LinkedIn not too long ago. This was just ahead of the strike, that probably the fastest strike that I've ever seen happen. But I enjoyed I always enjoy your commentary. I mean, from owning dealerships and working in dealerships and being around the industry for as long as you have, your breadth of experience and wisdom is something that I pay attention to.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Let me ask you, I mean, what a weird 5 years. And I don't even want to get into the pandemic because I'm sick of saying that word.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've worked in the industry for enough time to see the ebbs and flows, to track what's happening, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, what you can expect. And so I want to just kind of turn this over to you and say, in the phase that we're in at time of recording, we're like, I don't know, 2 weeks out from a controversial election in the United States.
Just a little election, no big deal, right? No
just
biggie.
A little bit.
Yeah, no biggie.
And you're looking at the playing field and all of the factors that are impacting retail and wholesale market. What are some of the things that are standing out to you that you're paying attention to?
So a couple of things. Obviously, number one, the election. I think the election is going to determine, a lot of things. And I don't really want to get political, so we won't do that. But how it's going to affect our business kind of remains to be seen. I think that there will be, if Kamala Harris wins, we'll probably see more of a push from the government towards EVs. If Trump wins, I don't think he's going to say we're not doing EVs anymore. I don't see that happening, but I don't think there'll be as much of a push, or maybe some of the incentives that we're seeing now. But I don't think EVs are going to go away. I think in terms of monetary policy, I don't really think there's going to be much of a difference. Interest rates need to be where they are, if not go down. In terms of government regulation and taxation, though, I would probably lean more towards Trump. I think that typically when Republicans are in office, it's more favorable to businesses. And that's as far as the election goes. I'm very closely watching what's going on overseas because I think it could potentially affect gas prices a lot. As of today, which is the 22nd, right? Was it today's 22nd? We are on potentially the verge of a major war between Iran and Israel. And if that's the case, it will affect oil prices. It will affect the price of gasoline. Potentially a lot. And I had mentioned that a few weeks ago in my post when it looked like it was really going to escalate a lot, and it still could. It's a tinderbox over there, right? We don't know what's going to happen. If gas goes up a lot, it will definitely mess up our business 100%. It's going to mess up the used car market. It's going to mess up the new car market. It'll really hurt consumers a lot because consumers are already pinched. You can see that with delinquencies on car loans. There is a lot going on out there when it comes to that. So I'm paying attention to that very closely. The used car market right now is, people are scrambling to get used cars. We lost a lot of cars during these last few hurricanes here. They were bad. They were really, really bad. And I still don't think we've seen the effect of it yet because, insurance companies are still just kind of picking up the pieces here. It's going to take a month to get through this. A lot of cars got lost. I think over 100,000 cars, if not more. So there's people right now sitting in rental cars. They're going to be in for a while. So you're going to have rental cars with miles coming back, that dealers are going to end up probably buying to sell. You're going to sell rental cars with more miles. Typically, some of the rental cars that would have gotten defleeted now that we would have been buying as dealers right at this moment. And when the market's low in the fall, typically in the used car market, aren't there. So I think we're going to see a shortage of those cars. There's going to be a demand for inexpensive cars because a lot of people that lost their cars were in rural areas where they can't afford late model, low mileage cars or new ones. So there will be some sort of demand. What that'll be, I don't truly know. My recommendation to anybody is still stay very, very disciplined because, there's some people that are really good at hedging the used car market, and you got to go really when the timing is right. I would have I'd be ready, right? I remember 9/11. I remember the first time we had $4 gas. I remember 08, 09. I was fortunate enough to be in a position with working capital plus the line of credit that I had with Ally, where I was able to pull the trigger at the right time. Because I wasn't over leveraged. And there's a lot of dealers out there that are over leveraged and some that aren't. And the ones that are not over leveraged, when they see an opportunity to buy some used cars, I suggest you buy them because there will be a shortage of used cars for a while. It's just a fact. I mean, they're not going to be enough used cars around for quite a bit. So, um, you know,
Let me
that's
ask you
that's
this.
that's
I
a
mean,
lot. So, what are your thoughts?
yeah, well, first of all, this just validates how I introduced you first and foremost. I've already taken a whole page of notes. I'm like, these are only words that somebody can spout who's lived through,
I've
some
seen
things.
it.
Two overarching questions I have. The first one is the dealer listening that is over leveraged right now and they know they're over leveraged. How do you transition out of that? Like what are some things they could be thinking about or doing to get back into a healthier position?
Well, I think, first of all, you got to make sure your business is running properly. I think that's number one more than anything else. I know you don't want to talk about COVID, but COVID did cause a lot of complacency and mediocrity in our business. And I think that's first. If I owned a dealership, whether I was over leveraged or I wasn't, I would be mystery shopping my store professionally. I would hire people to do some mystery shopping, not just on the phone and not just by filling out leads, potentially even in the store as well to see how people are being treated, right? A lot of dealers have just gone back to very much old school tactics and old school habits, pre-COVID type of habits. Um, I think we just got sloppy as an industry. We really did. We took advantage of a situation where there was a lot of supply. Also, a lot of people came into the industry the last few years had never been in it before, and they came in during a very easy time. So these people need to be educated. They need to be taught history. They need to be trained. They need to learn how to follow up and how to prospect and do things like that. I think that's number one. You got to make sure your business is healthy. Number two, I'd be looking at luxuries versus necessities. I mean, we don't know how business is going to be. Business is still pretty good right now. Everybody's saying, well, profits are going down. They're still better than they were, pre-COVID. Business is still pretty good for most people, unless you got a CDJR store or
Right.
and that's a challenge right now, but that'll end up probably working itself out. They're gonna have to buy their way out of it with incentives or lower their prices or both. So that will come. And if you're a good used car dealer and a CDGR dealer, you can survive. But luxuries versus necessities, right? Like that's really, really, really important. We've all been able to afford a lot of luxuries over the last few years because a ton of money's been made. But I'd be looking at my expenses real, real hard, come this time of year. It's always a good time of year to do it at the end of October because you can just look at your statement, divide it by 10, and it's relatively easy. You don't need any spreadsheets and formulas and this and that. I can look at the year-to-date expenses divided by 10 and figure out what my averages are and maybe compare it to what my expenses were pre-COVID. I'll guarantee you everything is a lot more money right now and grosses are going down, which means your bottom line is going down. Retraining people, right? Like that's huge, like I mentioned before, in all departments and really trying to adapt some new technologies. There's a lot of things coming out there with AI, and I know it's a big buzzword, but there will be some very relevant software products in our industry that are really going to help dealers, I think, be more efficient and help cut some costs a little bit and give consumers really the experience, in my opinion, that they deserve when they answer, when they make a call on the telephone, or they fill out a form online, or they just need to be followed up with. It's important.
You say something. I don't ever really get political either. I love people wondering how I affiliate, though I think some people probably know just the way I speak. But you said something I think is so interesting, especially as it pertains to prospecting and complacency. Here you have former President Trump going to work at a McDonald's to have one-to-one interactions with people to scoop up a few more, perhaps undecided voters. And Todd, we can't get car salespeople to take out a sheet of paper and write a list of the 100 people they know that they could invite in to come to the dealership. And you think of the stakes, somebody that's got gazillions of dollars in funding, willing to go to the one, go to the individual. And then if I'm a car sales professional sitting in my store waiting for the dealer provided opportunities that the dealer is probably overpaying for, wondering why I can't sell more cars, and this like need to get up off your butt and get out into the community and go and create opportunity for yourself.
I completely 100% agree with what you're saying. And what I will tell you is this. I think as a dealer or as a general manager, or you're in any kind of management position at a dealership, whether it's in variable operations or fixed operations, you got to be out on the showroom floor. You got to be out in your service lane. You need to be listening to phone calls that are coming into your dealership and hear what is on people's mind when they talk to somebody on the telephone at your dealership. Listen to what's going on in the showroom. That's why today, when I consult, one of the things I do is I hang around the showroom, right? Like I don't sit in conference rooms. Like you have to at some point, but I like to listen to people. I like to listen to phone calls because you got to see what's going on, realize what's going on with people on a day-to-day basis. So you kind of can get in their head a little bit. And I think that's really, really important if you want to run a successful business as a dealer. And even if as a salesperson or a service advisor or anybody who's customer facing, a BDC manager, a BDC rep, right? Like understand the everyday challenges of, Mr. and Mrs. America out there, or the single parent, right? The struggle that a single mother's going through, or a single father is going through, or whatever, right? Or a college kid right now that can't find a job, right? Like you got to understand what's going on in the real world. And I would also add that the manufacturers too, right? I love the people from the OEMs, and I got along great with them when I owned dealerships. But one of the things that I always thought that they should do, which I didn't see them do very often, was spend some time at a car dealership and see what's going on, right? Not
Mm,
like focus groups and all this other nonsense that you pay a lot of money for. Like go hang around a car dealership, right? For
right.
a couple of days. I just was at one of my dealers. I work with in Michigan for 2 days. I spent time in the showroom and the service lane. And I'll tell you what, you learn a lot. You learn a ton.
Hey, does your marketing agency suck? Listen, before we hop back into this episode, I know you know me as the host of the Dealer Playbook, but did you also know that I'm the CEO of Flex Dealer, an agency that's helping dealers capture better quality leads from local SEO and hyper-targeted ads that convert? So if you want to sell more cars and finally have a partner that's in it with you that doesn't suck, visit flexdealer.com. Let's hop back into this episode. It's kind of the age-old thing. It's a weird balance between new age, right? You're talking about AI softwares and the things that it's going to be able to help you do, and also the caution against some old school, antiquated processes that we're falling back into. And then also the flip side of that, which is there are some old school processes that just are time tested and proven, like you said, listening to your customers, getting into their head a little bit, understand what's going on. And it's just the simplicity of, it's almost so simple it's stupid. You want to know what's going on in someone's head? Listen to them.
Correct.
Ask
That's it.
them and
Listen.
listen to
Yep.
those phone calls, because boy, do they volunteer their life
Mhm.
story on those phone
Well,
calls.
I could tell you what, too. I'll tell you what else is listening to phone calls. AI is listening to phone calls, right? And it is training and it is learning and is getting better and better and better. And if you are somebody in any kind of industry, I don't care what business you're in, whether it's car business or whatever, you better worried about getting replaced, right? And I think the only thing that is going to help people, especially people that have a lot of technical positions, is they got to be able to have communication skills and talk to people and communicate, look someone in the eye, have a sense of humor, right? Shake a hand with a firm grip. I think it's important. Ask for the sale. Show empathy. Emotional intelligence. I would tell you, emotional intelligence is probably something that AI will never have, at least probably not in my lifetime, maybe yours. But you can have that, and that probably will give you as an advantage, no matter what you do for a living, or if you're a parent or a spouse or whatever, right? Emotional intelligence is going to be really, really important.
Who I couldn't be more aligned with you on this. I was having a conversation about this not too long ago, and they asked my thoughts. Obviously, I own a tech-enabled marketing company, and we develop inventory software that has AI built into it and things of that nature. People say, "Well, we're afraid for our jobs. What can we do to mitigate that?" And to your point of emotional intelligence, my thought was, well, AI will replace all of the work and all of the jobs that don't require a soul.
It's great.
You know,
Perfect. Yes.
and
100%.
emotional intelligence, you want to bypass that. I'm curious your thoughts on this. I mean, when we become AI everything, streamlined everything, Do you think our human nature, there will be a large enough group of us that almost makes us desire human to human connection even more?
Yes, it should, right? I would think it definitely, compassion and love will never, ever, ever go away. Emotional intelligence will never go away, in my opinion. I'll give you an example. I live in North Carolina, right? And we were talking about this before we started. I went and with my neighbor who used to be in the army, and we brought some well-needed supplies to a place in North Carolina that it was right on the edge, I would call it, of ground zero, right? Like it was 15 minutes from this town called Spruce Pine that got devastated. We ended up bringing all this stuff to a Baptist church, but what I saw before we got the stuff there was amazing. There's a small airplane hangar around here. People have really small planes, and everybody from the town, other than Mooresville, was bringing things over to this airplane hangar. And when I first pulled in with my friend, this hangar was filled with stuff, just filled with stuff. And a tractor trailer had just pulled in from Allentown, Pennsylvania, filled with stuff. I'm seeing stuff on Facebooks from people up in New York, where I'm from Syracuse, like people bringing stuff down. Like, you know, human beings at the end of the day, we don't get along. We fight. Some people want to fight about politics. Some people want to fight about a lot of other things. But at the end of the day, when there is tragedy, we come together. And I don't see AI replacing that. Honestly, can probably help. I mean, if you look at, did you see what Elon Musk introduced a couple of weeks ago with the robots and the cars that drive themselves? Anybody that thinks that won't happen, I think is foolish to really think that. I think we will live in that world, and you and I will see it. I'm in my early 50s. I will have robots cleaning my cars. I can guarantee you, in probably 3 to 5 years from now, and I think other car dealers will too. There'll be robots changing oil, rotating tires, and doing some basic things in the service department. There will be robots in factories. There will be robots in Amazon.com. A lot of people are going to get replaced that do those kind of things, and they're going to have to retrain and find something else to do. And if they don't, or if they can't, then as a society and as a world, we're going to have to figure out how to provide for these people at the end of the day. And that's going to require leadership, number one. And number two, like you and I talked about, emotional intelligence and empathy and compassion, because there's going to be people that are going to need it.
It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to
True.
process.
These are the kind of
exciting in a
crazy things I
way,
think about, Mike. I guess my wife says I'm nuts, but this is the kind of stuff I think about.
but I mean, it's also, I think, if you're not thinking about these things, and this is a general call out to the DPB audience, if you're not thinking about these things, that's when you should be afraid. Thinking about these things, you're probably going to go through some motions like anger and frustration, and you'll eventually get to acceptance. And you have to pass through each of those things to afford yourself the ability to process and understand and see opportunity. I think, one of the greatest things my dad could have ever done for our family was call us, this is early 90s, call us into his home office and say, guys, watch this. Connects us to the internet through the
Dial-up, yeah.
loads up the Encyclopedia Britannica website. And I'll never forget this, Todd. He looked at me and he said, Mike, this is going to replace the encyclopedia salesperson. Because at that time they were coming door to door. The Hoover salesperson, the Watkins, all of them gone. And that impressed upon me. I might have been 13, 14 years old, something like that. And that really impressed upon me. Oh, like I need to adopt. I look at now, devices in everyone's pockets. I look at the landscape, like you and I feel are a bridge generation in which we identify with boomers. We also are young enough and thinking enough and aware enough that we can understand kind of new and emerging technology. And we're young enough that we adopt it, and we're, not holding iPhones like a 110-year-old, like, what do I do with this thing? But what's the implication on that for millennial generation, for Gen Z? Like, where are they headed? You said robots doing oil changes and whatnot. So what should that generation, who's already, some of them already in the business, what should they be thinking about? Where do they evolve?
Mm, So, I was talking about this with somebody a couple weeks ago when I was visiting this dealer. My biggest concern for these younger kids, that generation, and like my son included, my daughters, they've never really seen adversity or hard times, right? They haven't seen a 9/11. They haven't seen an 08, 09. They haven't seen a tragic, like, shock to the system where all of a sudden things are crazy. They went through COVID, right? Don't get me wrong. Like, that was a big deal. Like, that
Right.
was a really, really big deal. Don't get me wrong. But they were still, for the most part, people were still okay financially. Not everybody was. But as they get older and they have to provide for themselves and provide for their family, and they're not a child or even a young adult going through COVID where their parents kind of help them get through it, when the next big thing comes, I don't know if they're going to know how to be able to handle it, right?
Mm,
They don't, a lot of them, they don't deal with, and I'm not calling any of them out because there's some really, really talented and very smart people, like my son and my kids, smart kids. I'm not just saying it because they're mine. And I've met a lot of them like out and about. The problem is
sure.
I'm not seeing enough of them. And my son says this too, like, and even my daughters, when we talk about this kind of stuff, they're like, some kids are, they're just clueless, and I hear this from my kids. And that's what really scares me more than anything else is what's going to happen when some adversity comes, whether it's financial or emotional or whatever. Because unfortunately, a lot of those kids, they got ribbons and trophies for second place. And
Right.
they had graduation for like they had graduation for first grade and for kindergarten and like graduate. I graduated when I graduated from high school. I don't know about you, but that's kind of how it was. Like
Yeah.
that's when you got your diploma. That's when you got your cap and gown. It was high school. But there's all these different ceremonial things, which I can understand how people think it's important to reinforce children and make them feel good about themselves. But it's almost been like too much, right? So we got to kind of get
I
back to a
always have a hard
balance.
time. Yeah. I mean, I have a hard time reconciling this as well to what you just said because earlier in my early 20s, I went to the Philippines and did missionary work there, and there I see 6-year-olds cooking and on the street selling and I'll never forget this experience. These little beautiful little kids um, were begging for food, right? They were
Yeah.
hungry, probably 9, 10 years old, something like that. And I went into my apartment and all I had was a loaf of bread, like a loaf of white bread. By the way, they eat a ton of white bread in the Philippines. So I go in and I get a loaf of bread from Julie's Bake Shop and I bring it out and I give it to them, and to watch them go and bring it to their siblings and their friends who were younger than them. And so to me, what I have a challenge reconciling to your point, because I feel what you're saying and I agree with it, is the balance of how do we, in our society, in our cultural context, allow or afford our children or this next generation to experience adversity so that when they're out on their own, they actually can deal with it. Because I'm with you. I'm like, has my son pushed a lawnmower more than 12 times in his life? He's 15. I mean, by 10, I had a lawn mowing business because
Me
I was
too.
like, let's go,
Yeah, man, me too. And my kids, they're spoiled, right? But they work, they have jobs, like they've always had to have a job. And when they're not in school, they're all in college now. So my youngest daughter is she's a senior in high school, but they had to work, right? If they weren't playing
Right.
a sport full time, they had to work. My wife calls it grit, right? My wife Amy, she calls it grit, and I think that that's a great word to describe it. She thinks I spoil the kids too much. And sometimes I do, but I remind her at the end of the day, they still got hustle, they still got grit, they still want to work, which is good. They're hungry, they're a little greedy, and I think that greedy in a lot of cases is, in the right context can be a good word. Um, but that's when you were talking, I were talking before, right? Like some of these kids that are their teens and 20s, even their 30s, they don't understand hustle when it comes to sales. They don't follow up. I was looking at getting solar at one of my properties, right? And solar's that's a commission business, as we know.
Right.
So I had this guy come last week. Nice guy, probably in his late 20s, really articulate, very smart. Gave me an awesome presentation on his laptop about, you know, putting the panel, just you're looking at a screen. He puts the panels on the roof, how much money you're going to save, when the sun's going to hit at certain times of the year, where it's going to hit on the house, if there's tree coverage. Like, it was amazing, blew me away. So he sent me proposals, and I've been ghosting him now for the last couple of days, just on purpose, right? Because first of all, I want to negotiate with him, I want to chop him. But number two, more than anything else, I want to see how hard he follows up. And I do this a lot, right? Like, if anytime I want something done at my house or whatever, or I'm going to buy any kind of big ticket item, I want to see how hard people follow up. And I have to tell you, you'd be surprised. People do not follow up like they used to. And they don't follow up how I train my people when I own businesses that they should follow up. And even as a consultant now, where, if I'm trying to pick up an account or pick up some business, I hustle, like, I want to earn it. And I think that's the difference.
What you're saying, I completely agree with, and it also enrages me because anybody that's listened to my show that's been with me for a while now knows especially when it comes to buying stuff, I've already sold myself. I am a complete laydown. I've said this, Todd, probably on 100 different episodes of this podcast now, that I am a lay down. I walk onto a lot and I go, that one, and you might as well just put all the warranties and gap and everything you can on it, because it's going to be, I need it for write-offs anyways.
Yeah.
Like, it just is what it is, right? I'm a different kind of customer. And so I was looking at swapping trucks. You know this. The accountant says you should think about, and I go, okay. So thinking about swapping trucks, I reach out to people I know who own dealerships for the brand that I want. I said, show me what you got. Here's my trade. I've got some negative. I know how it works. I know I'm going to be spending a little bit more of this, that, and the next thing. The amount of follow-up I had to do for them who have I'm the customer and I'm a laydown, Todd, and I'm following up. Are you going to get me the numbers? When can I expect those? Are you going to put it together? 2 weeks goes by, I hear nothing. Oh, sorry, I'm sick. I didn't. I'm going, what is happening right now?
Exactly. You feel like you almost feel like you're in the twilight zone. And that's how I feel sometimes when we're talking about this subject. It just blows my mind. And I have to tell you, right, it frustrates me as a consultant, because it's hard when I own my business, right? I train people. I had people train my people. They had to meet certain expectations. And then when you go in as a consultant, when you used to be a business owner for so long, and you teach and you show process, right, and you show how things should be done, but you aren't responsible. Like, I can't hold people accountable as a consultant. That's not really my job to.
Right.
I try to, but I mean, if I'm dealing one-on-one with a general manager or a dealer and they want me to hold them accountable, I can do it, but it's not responsible for me to hold, like, salespeople accountable. I'm not a sales trainer, or that's not what I do.
Right.
And it frustrates me sometimes because I'm like, why aren't you pushing your people to hustle more? When I listen to mystery shops, or I try to buy things like, myself, like you and I are talking about,
Yeah.
it drives me nuts, because I think people are just leaving money on the table, and it's mediocrity, right? Like, when I created this little consulting business, I wanted to come up with a slogan, right, and a logo, and I worked with Paul Daly and Congruent and Robin and that crew. And Robin knows me well because she used to work with me, and she used to work for me. She said, let's use fear mediocrity, right? And that's if you look at my website or whatever, it's fear mediocrity. It's on my t-shirts, my hats, my mugs, all that, my golf balls, because I think you have to fear mediocrity in business, in your personal life, and really, honestly, too, in your spiritual life as well, right? Like, I think it's really, really important to not get complacent, right? Because complacency is mediocrity, and anytime in your physical health, like, you just can't. And that's how I try to live every day. And I'm certainly not perfect, but I certainly try, and I try to teach people that. Whether it's a client or a family.
Yeah, it's a segue for me into, the last kind of pillar of this that I wanted to talk to you about, which is leadership. And I feel like there's a deficiency in that. We know leadership is important. We know leadership skills should and ought to be developed. We talk a lot in our industry about how everything is stems from the top. Leaders set the temperature. But then, to your point about mediocrity, and by the way, I, there's so many there's so many things I love that you bring up, because for years now, Todd, as I talk to my team and my children, having experienced what I've experienced in the past with, overcoming demons and all the things, right? What I learned is that I don't fear anything other than mediocrity. It's the thing I say because I'm like, it's the one thing I can control. I'm not afraid of things that are outside of my control because I can't do anything about them. Mediocrity, I can do something about. It's fully within my control. And the segue there to leadership is so many people are concerned about learning leadership skills, not realizing that the first person we need to lead is ourselves. And if you're mediocre spiritually or professionally or personally, I want to get your thoughts on this. How in the world can you expect to lead somebody else?
If you know you're deficient and you're humble enough to admit it, then you have to surround yourself with those that are not, to make up for whatever skills you may lack. Right? No one's good at everything. I mean, when I owned car dealerships, I wasn't the best car dealer. I was a pretty good one, but I wasn't the best. But I'll tell you what, I knew what I wasn't good at, and I was humble enough to admit it. And I hired some really smart, talented people. That was how, first of all, it was through the grace of God, number one, that brought me my success. But number two, I think God brought me some really great people, some very, very talented people who helped overcome where I was weak and help make up for it. And then, by having those people, it helped bring in other people that were talented as well, because people that are talented like to work with other people that are talented. You know, you don't see a superstar athlete wanting to work with a mediocre coach or a bad coach. They just leave, right? Or they just get recruited and they go somewhere else. And it's the same thing in any kind of business, especially the car business. And those are people that are listening out there in the car business know exactly what I'm talking about. If
Right.
there's a great manager in town, or a hot new store that goes in, or if there's a buy sell and a new dealer comes in that's really aggressive, who's spending a lot of money in marketing, and they all want to go there, right? Because at the time I was that guy. I was able to grab a lot of talent in my market, because people wanted to come and work for me, because it was some of it was me, but a lot of it was I just had great leaders. They wanted to be around great people, dynamic people, people that did not want to be complacent or mediocre.
Talent seeks out talent. It's like success breeds success, talent finds talent. And that kind of is in some way or another, for those that are sitting there saying, well, how come we can never attract the right talent? Because I know that's something that people say. It's kind of full circle back to the first thing you brought up, which was, I got a mystery shop. I got to look internally. I need to see where I'm operationally inefficient. I need to make a plan. How do you reconcile that understanding of, I need to look at my business, and it's going to take time in a business that so firmly holds to a 30-day cycle to see results and everything?
I think if you're going to commit to have somebody come in from the outside, whether it's me or really anybody else, number one, you have to be willing to be humble enough to understand that you want to get better. You have deficiencies in your business, but I think more importantly, you and whoever is involved in your leadership team has to be determined that you're going to be holding people accountable at the end of the day, because a mystery shop can identify 10,000 different things. I can come into a dealership or dealerships or whatever and pick it apart, right? We all can pick it apart. I didn't have a perfect business either, not even close. But if you're humble enough to acknowledge where you're weak, um, humble enough and smart enough to look at some suggestions to make the change, and then be willing to have an organization that is willing to actually make those changes to get better, then you're going to be successful. If not, you're just going to keep spinning your wheels. Like I know, I there's people out there, and it's not just in the car business, but in general, they'll hire a coach, a consultant, whether it's in the car business or a coach for physical fitness or a life coach or whatever. But if they're not willing to, really sweat and do what it takes, you're never really going to change. You're just going to run through a hamster wheel and just honestly just waste a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Makes
saying?
so much sense. Yep. Makes so much sense. We've covered a lot of territory.
It's just fun,
and
man.
I hope
You and I could probably talk another couple hours.
Oh, undoubtedly we could. I'd love to have you back on the show and we can dig into it further. I mean, so much of what you say resonates deeply with me, and I know is going to resonate deeply with our audience here at the Dealer Playbook. How can those listening or watching connect with you? What's the best way?
My website is toddcaputoconsulting.com. Right. It's pretty easy to find. Google my name and my website will come up, Todd Caputo. You can call me. My number is 315-289-7979 or connect with me on LinkedIn. I've got a pretty good sized following on LinkedIn. I have people reach out to me all the time. And, if you just want to reach out, just talk about the car business or whatever, why am I doing this now? It really is about being a servant leader and giving something back to the business. I've been really blessed. I sold my car dealerships to a publicly traded company. I got a master's degree basically working for them. And I want to give back to the industry really more than anything else. So I don't care who you are. And I get people to reach out to me all the time. Can I just ask you a question? Absolutely. Anytime. Message me on LinkedIn, call me, fill out a form on my website. I'd be happy to help you out any way that I can.
Todd Caputo, thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook Podcast.
Thanks, Mike.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Dealer Playbook Podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please subscribe, share, and hit that like button. You can also join us and the DPB community on social media. Check back next week for a new Dealer Playbook episode. Thanks so much for joining.